Hey everyone, it's Mike here, and I thought today I would just do a little bit of an impromptu video on the International Aquatic Plants Layout Contest. This year, my goodness, wow, congratulations to everyone who entered, and I literally mean everyone. In order for you to get your aquarium into this contest on time and be proud of it, I'm just amazed by all of the work. So again, well done and congratulations to all of you. So in this particular video here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop onto this computer screen here. I'm going to take a look at some of the contestants and some of the entries this year, and we are going to just have a discussion on some of the ones that I thought were quite noteworthy, as well as taking a closer analysis at the top 7. And we're going to discuss how those particular aquascapes made it into the top 7, as well as just some of the features that good aquascapers put into their work as well. So again, I just want to give credit to every single one of you who have entered into this competition. I know how difficult it can be, and so you should be very, very proud. And if you haven't ever entered into this competition, I hope that this video here provides you some insight into how this competition works, as well as some of the skills that you can pick up from our master aquascapers today. So let's take it away. All right, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking at this screen here, and I want to start off with a notable mention here to my friend Mark Clifton in Australia, of course, and my goodness, Flow, a beautiful aquascape that demonstrates the movement of water and plants and the movement of fish here. So we have such a beautiful contrast between reds and greens that are moving in this particular aquascape, and it's very reminiscent of what we've been seeing lately in the aquascaping world, with these very large, dominant, almost trunk-like pieces of wood that spread out into the aquarium to create this concave layout. So again, it's a beautiful work of art. Mark, you should be extremely proud of this. I know that just between us friends here, we do talk to each other about our aquascapes, and I think that's one of the greatest things about aquascaping is that a lot of people don't do this alone. We do it as a community, so well done, Mark. One of the things that I really love about this particular aquarium is Mark has such a good eye for his foreground, and this foreground is very well mastered. I mean, if we take a look here, we have a different mixture of plants here. We take it from this incorporation of these leaf shapes of hydrocotyle to the AR mini down here, to incorporation of Anubias over here, and of course hairgrass. So it's a beautiful composition, and that deserves a notable mention. Another aquarium that I want to showcase as a notable mention, as we're going to scroll through here, are some of the aquariums that I think I would personally keep in my own home. So for example here, Rio Watanabe. This is such a beautiful, happy aquarium. When I look at this, especially with the bold plants contrasted with a bright background, for me, this is an example of masterful plant health, as well as a very good example of a classic nature aquarium style that Takashi Amano was a big proponent of. And something that I thought was quite interesting was the incorporation here of a plant that you don't see quite often, which is, I believe that's Hygrophila polysperma. I could be wrong, but it's a very sort of odd plant to add into a contest level aquascape. But I thought that was just a very interesting touch there that, believe me, it's appreciated. So that's what we're looking at here. So this is something I would definitely keep in my home. Well done, Rio Watanabe. All right, let's move on up. Another one from Andorra, Bernat Hosta. Another beautiful composition here, very minimalistic in its, I guess, its complexity on the path here. When we take a look at it, there's not much planting going on, but the complexity on this path here is amazing. The depth from the foreground all the way to the background here is really something to behold. So well done on that one as well, Mr. Bernat. All right, let's go up here to one of the other aquariums that I would like to, I guess, show some appreciation for here is Hidekazu Tsukiji, an amazing bold stone layout and the incorporation of ferns into these cracks and the almost diagonal lines that are created in this aquascape really create a sense of movement, a sense of direction. And I think for me, this is a type of aquascape that I would love to see in my home. And the reason why I say these aquascapes in my personal home is because these, unlike some of the other competition aquascapes out there, are a lot easier to maintain. Like when I'm looking at these, I'm looking at what it would be like to keep these aquariums every single day and to maintain and trim them. And so this particular example here would make a beautiful aquarium in anyone's home. So well done, Mr. Hidekazu. Alrighty, and of course, how can I forget Stephen Chong? Well done to you for creating such a beautiful expression of cold water. So I think Stephen deserves his own video on this particular aquascape, and I know he's going to come out with his own video as well. So if you haven't seen his channel, please head on over to Stevescapes and you will see him in the near future, or maybe already now, release an aquascape analysis video of his construction here. But when I look at this, I get it straight away. And let me tell you about the impact that this aquarium had. When we were watching this in a room with an audience, everyone at the same time unanimously agreed that this was an impactful aquascape. And everyone said, wow. We didn't get that reaction from everyone else. So Stephen, well done. What's so amazing about this aquarium is its treatment of light, its treatment of color as well. If you scroll through the entire gallery of aquascapes in this competition, this one just stands out in terms of its color, and I imagine it would have captured the attention and curiosity of judges for sure. Another thing that I found to be extremely beautiful with this aquarium was a sense of stillness, but at the same time, some real dynamic movement in the placement of the wood, and of course, dynamic movement in the hardscape itself, contrasted with the stillness of these plants here. And one thing I really appreciate about Stephen's work is he only mentioned this in the past, but I started to catch on to it, was the change in colors within the plants as well. He doesn't create scapes, or at least this is my understanding, scapes with plants that are flat in color. So what you'll find is some of the plants have a little bit of yellow, some of the plants have a little bit of white, and that also shows a little bit of texture and age in the way plants are growing naturally across different seasons as well. Sometimes plants aren't in their most healthy condition, and sometimes plants out in nature transform, and so that's especially expressed in this section of his aquascape here. And of course, one of the other things that I really do appreciate about Stephen's work here is the masterful composition of moss-scaping as well. He doesn't just layer it on as if it were icing on a cake. There is some very intentional placed moss on this wood, because in nature, especially in these colder water environments, you will not find a 100% moss covered wood underneath water. So really pulling back that planting, I mean, this is something reminiscent of Stephen's scapes, is that the planting isn't exactly packed to the brim, but again, the combination of hardscape, of materials and path lines and fish, of course, create a beautiful impression. So well done, Stephen. And let's move on now to the top 7. And what I'm going to do is I'll start off with number 7 here. Origin, Dawn Light by Juan Puchades. Again, my apologies to anyone who has their name mispronounced, but I'm just going to start with number 7 here. And this aquascape is just a beautiful composition of light and color and shape. And one thing that you'll notice in the top 7 is negative space is starting to diminish in these aquascapes, you are finding that you are seeing a lot more hardscape fill the entire aquarium. And if you think about it, this aquarium is 55 centimeters high, which means the hardscape itself goes almost to the top of this aquarium. And I can only imagine just how long it would have taken to construct this particular hardscape. So what are the defining features that I notice in this particular aquascape? Well, firstly, I noticed that there are 3 pathways or 3 particular directions that one could look. We have here, firstly, the false pathway on the right that goes into this very dark cave down here. And it's almost as if this darker path lures you into the shadows. The second pathway is quite an interesting one. It's a lower pathway through the cave and then onto the other side. And then, of course, you have this upper pathway for your eyes to go and find this focal point at the top. So very well done to include 3 different pathways, or at least 3 different directions for the eyes to move, is very amazing. And of course, your eyes are being, I guess, led to this horizon here through the leading line of this rock, and this leading line that brings you up to this horizon and this bright space as well. So I believe one had a very intentional end point with a little fish down here for this aquascape. The other masterful thing that I saw in this particular aquascape was the use of roots. Sometimes when we aquascape, we don't really account for the fact that these plants have some very beautiful roots that can be incorporated as a aquascaping feature. And so I think of the sort of vines and lianas that kind of grow off of these canyon caves, and this particular aquascape really captures that essence quite well. Again, we're also seeing in this year's competition the use of Monte Carlo that weeps across the rocks, and in this particular composition it wasn't overdone, it was controlled. So you have some very thinly cut and thinly placed Monte Carlo, or that could potentially be HC, so Hemianthus cuba, but from what I can tell, Monte Carlo tends to creep just as in the same fashion. So my goodness, that is a beautiful use of Monte Carlo there. So again, one, congratulations, a beautiful aquascape with such beautiful contrast between light, dark, red, green, and of course the use of this dragon stone to create a very bold red layout. That's just some real beautiful stuff. Alrighty, let's go this way. Although in the darkness, again, a very beautiful aquascape from Efrain Sequeira from Spain. Congratulations. Embrace, Josh Sim, another one of the masters. And Josh this year created another masterpiece that I thought was quite calming, something that was very different to his last year's work, which had a very dark, ominous, almost gothic feeling to it. This one here gives me the impression of the creation of Adam, like God touching Adam in the heavens. But let's talk about some of the features that I thought were very strong in this aquascape here. So we have the use of reflections, and that's something that I think Josh is an expert at. He creates these reflections that extend the aquascape, because the aquarium actually ends here. But what he does what he did in this particular aquascape was he stretched the entire field of rotala at the back all the way into the reflection. And the thing is, the reflection doesn't look like an absolute mirrored image. Now, of course, you can sort of see there is a bit of mirroring happening here, but I believe Josh is very intentional with the way that the reflections look, so that they do not look like an exact replica from side to side. So again, that's one of the things that Josh does, and is an amazing artist in that regard. I also found the use of ember tetras this year to be quite interesting. People are gravitating to more smaller fish in this year's competition, and I think that's something that is very reminiscent of what Amano used to do in his aquascapes, was to add in smaller fish to emphasize the scale of the entire space. And I also noticed this trend this year is that the presence of healthy plants would definitely allow people to rank higher. I think the health of plants is something that has taken a bit of a backseat in aquascaping over the past couple of years, where a lot of people focus on the hardscape and the construction of the overall landscape, a georama or diorama aquascape style. This year, I believe plants are definitely in focus. One more thing that I think Josh is also really good at is his ability to create these long, distant horizons by placing small, dark stones that create almost a mountain scene in the background. This cut off path down here creates that leading line into that horizon. So again, a beautiful feature, and of course, something that I thought was a piece of, I guess, quirk, something that all aquascapes need to have is just a bit of intrigue. This circular hole here, this was definitely intentional. It was placed at the front. It is proud. He did not cover it with moss. I think this circular hole here was definitely designed to be seen. Josh, you can correct me on that, but it's definitely something that I was pulled into. I thought it was quite awkward at first, but then I guess the crowd started to warm up to it and people saw that as something that was quite intriguing. Now I can see why. And I think it has to do something with the human mind. We look at these things and we see these circles amongst all these sharp directions here, and it almost pulls us in as if it were an eyeball. So again, a little bit of intrigue does go a long way. Well done, Josh. This is, again, another masterpiece that you've created, and I really look forward to seeing what you do next year. Okay, let's take a look at Synergy by Matthew Israel Maines from the Philippines. And my goodness, isn't this just a very heavy layout? And again, the lack of negative space in the horizon. I mean, if you were to analyze this aquascape in terms of what is hardscape versus what is back glass here, I believe this would be roughly 10 to 12% of glass here. And this is very reminiscent of Fukada's work. And again, Matthew, I mean that in the most, I guess, praiseworthy way of your work, because I believe the judges would have looked at this and went, wow, this is something that they feel is reminiscent of a master aquascaper like Fukada. And so we're starting to see here these almost crossing lines that draw you towards this bright relief in the background versus this very oppressive foreground. So one of the things that Matthew's done in this aquascape, I believe, is the contrast between what is heavy and oppressive and almost as if it were precarious and about to fall versus the expansion and relief of the background. I think that's such a beautiful way of creating both tension and release. One of the other things that I'm noticing this year is the incorporation of Bucephalandra and Anubias, but specifically Bucephalandra. We're starting to see more of that plant in the hobby. It's becoming a little bit more easily available, and so people are adding it to their aquascapes. That's something that you'll notice in the foreground on a lot of these masterscapes. And something else that I thought Matthew did quite cleverly, which kind of steps away from the Monte Carlo, is the use of Hydrocotyle tripetata as a form of draping plant. If you just get one string of that and you lay it down here, it's a very subtle way of creating that wetness effect that Stephen coined, the idea of dripping water and flow. So that's just, again, a beautiful treatment of both plants, hardscape, and tension versus relief. And that's amazing. This, again, deserves its own video as well. But let's move on. Rank number 4. Again, I apologize for butchering this name, but it's Ekthanat Isarathikul from Thailand. One thing you also notice is all of these aquariums in the top ranks are your landscape, almost cinematic aspect ratio aquariums. And this one here is a beautiful example of using the whole left to right plane of the aquascape. So we have an almost swirling vortex-like shape here. And that's the first thing that I noticed, is that the aquascape almost starts at the top here. It flows down through this wooden piece here. The use of flame moss to connect this foreground to the midground in that line. And then, of course, the overarching branches that create this vortex into the hairgrass background here is very subtle. And I believe this hairgrass also creates that type of horizontal and vertical swirling effect down here. It's as if it blurs into this a Gaussian blur into the vortex. So again, a beautiful aquascape that also this year incorporates something that I thought was quite interesting, and that is rainbow fish. I was actually going to consider this as a fish for one of my aquascapes, but I figured that it's very difficult to find them at this particular size and this particular color. So well done for such a beautiful use of fish in this aquarium, and perfectly placed as well, just in this negative space here in the foreground amongst the shadows. It's a little bit of, again, that intrigue, that curiosity that pulls you into this side of the scape. But according to the leading lines of the fish, they also conform to the flow. This, again, the revolve plus of this aquascape, a very beautiful example here. Again, the use of reflections to continue the aquascape, as well as expand this dark cave on the left side to mirror the right side as well. That is very smart. So congratulations on Revolve Plus and Rank 4, a beautiful aquascape. All right, heading up to Rank 3. It's getting really, I guess, we're starting to see the use of dragonwood here. It's almost becoming a trend that I'm seeing in this aquascape, this bold wood use in the aquarium, as well as the use of draping Monte Carlo. This one here I thought was something that I'd seen before, but at the same time, it elevated the entire hardscape off the ground, as if this wood were floating in the water. And I thought that was quite an interesting concept. It's something that is done before, but there seems to be no grounding on this particular wood. It's as if water itself and the buoyancy of the log has lifted it up over time, and I guess that creates that natural expression again. One more thing you'll start to notice again is the diminishing of the background and negative space here. Again, we're talking here now under 10% of background glass being visible in this aquascape. But one of the strongest points that we can learn from Chan Hee Boon here from Malaysia is the use of plants in the foreground, especially, again, Bucephalandra and Anubias. But this year, the Bucephalandra has a really interesting feature, and you'll notice this. It's flowering. There's flowering Bucephalandra here on in the center, as well as on the right hand side. So I thought that was just an amazing use of Bucephalandra, Anubias, as well as Cryptocorini and hairgrass in the foreground. The use of course, rummy-nosed tetra is a very staple fish. Their high contrast red noses in juxtaposition to the dark background here, I think it does create a little bit of a jarring effect, but again, congratulations on World Rank 3. This is such a beautiful aquascape. All right, let's move on to now number 2. Storming from Minh Doang Nguyen in Vietnam. Well done. Congratulations. This is such a beautiful expression of movement as well as stillness. So let's take a look at 3 things that I thought were really good in this aquascape. The first thing is the composition of fish. I have used 2 fish in my past winning aquascape, and I used a combination of rummy-nosed tetra as well as some smaller cold water fish as well. And I believe that the use of 2 fish can actually create different depths. So you have here in the foreground a larger type of fish versus these very tiny ember tetras. So we have these larger tetras in the foreground and then smaller tiny tetras, and that almost creates a double layering effect as well. To be able to chase the fish around and to get them to form like that, I think that would have taken thousands of shots. So just the persistence of Min to be able to do that, congratulations. The first thing that I notice, of course, is fish, beautiful. The second thing that I notice is the reflection and the waves in the water at the top. This part of the aquascape is high energy, as if rains were coming down, the storm and the movement of the water creating that rough stream. And then over on this side here, it's still. And I think that's a really nice way of creating dynamic tension in the reflection of the water. Another thing you'll notice is all the fish moving in this sort of horizontal line and the wood moving in this horizontal line. Whereas over here, the plants move in this vertical line. And it's not done with such a jarring contrast effect because the wood does move in this horizontal and then vertical line. So we see here a transition from movement to stillness, and I think that is a very beautiful expression of that. The third thing that I noticed was really amazing about this aquarium is the contrast again from darkness, that fear in the shadows that you get, that lures you in, and then the relief in the light in the background, and another treatment of this beautiful bonsai shaped wood with moss that was very subtly placed in there to create these small branches. I thought that was a very clever expression of nature. So well done on storming. Such a beautiful aquascape, and you should be very proud of this, of course, representing Vietnam this year, who did extremely well as a team. So congratulations to Min for this particular aquascape. And let's move on now to gold prize from Yo-Yo Pro Yogi. And my goodness, how amazing is this ancient tree? And one of the things that I notice is titles matter because they really do offer an understanding of the aquascape. But with this particular aquarium, you don't need a title. You could call this aquarium and everyone would look at this and go, wow, this is an ancient tree. This particular aquascape, very, very beautiful in its way it treats the use of moss. I mean, take a look at this. This is not moss that you would normally find in other aquascapes in the way that it's been planted. It's as if it's pasted on there. You could almost mistake it for algae as well, but this is definitely a very fine moss that has been draped over this wood, and very thin as well. The cuttings of the moss in here creating texture where there would be normally a large green line. Yo-Yo has created these small shadowy cuts in the moss to create a level of texture that almost draws your eye into it. Another use of ember tetras, again bringing back the very old school nature aquarium use of fish this year. And I think this is such a great use of a concept that really speaks to the audience, speaks to the viewer as, yes, I have no doubts that this is an ancient tree. And of course, one of the things I wonder is this actually wood? Or is this stone? Or is this resin? Or is this something else? Because I look at it and it almost has the sharpness of stone, but at the same time, the formation is wood. And so to me, that also creates this notion of an ancient tree because it's something that's been petrified over time. So that's just an amazing use of the hardscape material, which hasn't been overly covered. The next thing that I thought number one was very good at doing is creating layers from foreground to midground to almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers into the distance here. This particular part of the aquascape creating that end point is very calming versus the almost jagged tension that is almost telling you to stay away. But at the same time, this part of the aquascape luring you in. So this to me speaks of a fantastical aquascape that has that. And of course, again, the second path obscuring itself and blocking out that light to tell you, no, don't go this way, go this way where the fish are moving. So what do we notice about all of these aquariums besides them being amazing works of art? These are masterfully created aquariums that take time, that have shown the real patience of the aquascaper and the care and diligence of the aquascaper. And so if you have entered into the contest this year, I really, really want to congratulate you. You should be proud of your work again. Take some inspiration from these creators. I know I certainly will in creating my aquascape in the future. There is a lot of learning for all of us to do, and definitely a lot of room for innovation. You'll notice that this year, my personal thoughts, and this is just speculation, it's about the health of plants, less about the hardscape and creating diorama. It's bringing it back to that nature aquarium style, but a style that someone can almost create in their home. Because if you notice, all of these aquariums here, whilst having their complexities, are not outside of the reach of most aquarists or plant keepers, because we can create an aquascape like this and plant it in the same way. So to me, this is really inspirational. It makes me want to create aquascapes, and I think that's what the competition is all about. It's about inspiring aquascaping across the world. So again, if you've enjoyed this video, I want to say thank you for joining in on the conversation. Please just leave a subscribe, or rather subscribe down there, leave a like or a comment, and tell us which aquascape out of the thousands this year, 2,600 plus aquascapes, were your favorite. And if you have a video of your aquascape that you entered into this competition, please share a link below as to what you've created as well. So again, thank you for joining us, everyone. It's been fun just doing this impromptu video. Again, not scripted, but just sharing you my thoughts and going back to aquascaping. In the background here, as you can tell, is my future competition aquascape. So I hope to see you all in 2022 for next year's contest. This year, of course, as you know, I was out of the game to focus on my reef tank, but next year I'll be back. All right, cheers everyone. Have a good night. Bye.